Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks again for joining us today. My name is Will Dave Rosnan and I work in the school attendance policy team here in the department. This is, I think, the fifth effective practice attendance webinar that we've run so far this academic year. And we've actually uploaded all the previous recordings for the other webinars to our best practice page. So if you're dialing in for the first time, you should be able to find the link, I think, on the right-hand side of your screen, which will take you to the recordings of all of the other webinars that we've run so far, if you're interested in listening to those ones. This afternoon, I'm joined by Diane Henson, and Diane is the head teacher of Wheelers Lane Technology Academy, which is an outstanding school based in Birmingham, and she's going to be talking about the school's work really to build a strong and effective culture for really good attendance. So really interested to hear what she has to say about what they do at their school. Before I pass over to Diane, there are a couple of things that I wanted to quickly mention right at the beginning, which will be familiar to anyone who has joined one of these sessions before. The first is that there's going to be a short 10-minute question and answer session at the end of this presentation. So if you've got any questions, you should be able to post them via the kind of question tab on the right hand side of your screen as well. As I mentioned, we've got a series of these webinars coming up. We've already had a number that we've delivered, but we're running them on an almost weekly basis now until the end of the term. So we've got a studio school actually next week, and we've got a series of primary, special and AP schools coming up for later in the term. So again, you should be able to find registration links for those webinars also on the right hand side of your screen. We'll send around the presentation and the slides after the webinar has concluded to anyone who's signed up. So if you're interested in looking at those, we'll be able to send them to you. And as ever, we're really interested in your feedback. So please let us know what you thought of both this session, but also, more importantly, perhaps what you'd like us to see, what you'd like to see us cover in future webinars and future presentations. And we'll be taking that feedback on board as we think about what we do next. So that, I think, is everything from me. And I'll pass over now to Diane to talk about Wheelers Lane. Thank you.
Hello everybody, thank you for joining, and I will take you through how we've really improved attendance and what we try and do to keep improving on that, literally day by day. So next slide please. So just to put us into context, it always helps to know we're an 11 to 16 school for about 665 boys, so we're smaller than the average secondary. 39.5% of our boys are disadvantaged, 28% currently entitled to free school meals, and 23.9% of our boys are on the SEND register. 10% of these have an EHCP, and we have a pending of another 3 that we're waiting for a final outcome on. We're in King's Heath in Birmingham, and it's an ethnically diverse population. It's a lovely place to be because it truly reflects the population of Birmingham. The mix in the school reflects, the context that we live in, which is a really healthy mix for us. So next slide, please. So the vision here, we have a whole kind of movement that we call the Wheelers Way. We strive for excellence for every child all the time. So wherever that child starts from, just like probably every single one of you do, we want them to do the very best that they can. We believe that to do that, it's not just about the academic outcome, it's also about the support and the nurturing environment that enables all of our staff and our students to have high expectations and take pride in everything they do. And everything they do isn't just their academic outcome. It might be the clubs they take part in, the community work they do, little things that they do outside. So staff will talk to them about the things they do at the weekend, what they've done in football club in the evening, all those different things. So those relationships build, and that environment around them makes school a really nice place for them to be. So we want the students to be motivated, which means that staff can then aspire to get the best possible version from them, but also to motivate the students, we need to have the staff motivated as well. So our staff are very much part of all the decision making we're a very collaborative school, and we like to make sure that everybody feels that they have an input. So it's not my school, it's not the senior leadership school, it's not the governor's school, it's our school, and that's the way we like to approach things. We try and model respect towards society as a whole and lead by example, but we're not perfect. You know, I'm not trying to describe some kind of utopia or Shangri-La of schools. We do the best we can in the circumstances that we work in. Most of the time we get it right, and we get it really right, but sometimes when we get it wrong, what we model is that if you get it wrong, you say you've got it wrong, and you acknowledge it and you move on from it, and that's what we teach the boys as well. So next slide, please. So we had a big improvement on attendance, and what changed, what made us focus really strongly on it was that our attendance was fairly average, but respectable when measured against figures for boys. So our persistent absence was 5.3. So in 2016, going back now, it seems an age ago, pre-COVID, we began to look at our PA figures and our overall cumulative attendance and the reasons for absence. You know, what we were doing at the time was maintaining this very average attendance. It wasn't going up, it wasn't going down. So we started to look at, well, what are we doing then? What could we do, or what can we change that would make that change that figure and that overall attitude towards attendance? So it soon became really clear that the systems that we were operating were not as strong and not as robust as we needed them to be. And the legal side of attendance management was not fully in use. We were using, at the time, it was Spotlight, but it was quite sporadic and it wasn't really strategic. So the very obvious impact of attendance on progress is stark. We all know that, you know, the figures about how many days children don't attend school and what the average outcome of that is, or how it affects the average outcome. And we've been telling children and parents this for a long time, but you can tell people things, but until you actually show them or you change things so that they can see what's in it for them, I don't think you are going to make an impact. You have to get people to understand, and it's not just the children, it's the parents, it's also your staff. Your staff need to understand how they can have such a massive impact on children wanting to come to school. You know, and I'll refer back to what I said about knowing the children, being able to have those conversations with them, have that interest in them as people and individuals, rather than just people sat in front of you learning history, geography, whatever. So we started to make some changes. So next slide, please. So we reviewed completely and restructured our pastoral practices. So we used to be vertical tutoring groups, so we had 7 to 11 informed groups, and we decided to change that to some extent. You know, we'd have been forced into that anyway with the whole COVID scenario, but we changed the vertical tutoring back to year groups, and we did that for a lot of very specific reasons. One was the delivery of our PHSE programme at the time. What you can teach to year 7 is not relevant to year 11 and vice versa. So the age appropriate content meant that the sessions in the morning and the afternoon were far more relevant than the children had had. The interaction between them in terms of peer interaction was much stronger. And if you like, the expertise of the form tutors was much better when they had a specific year group to deal with. So our tutors stay with our children from year 7 to year 11, but each year they go into, the training's put in place for that specific year group. So that made quite a difference in how the children felt about coming into form time, spending time with their form tutor, rather than being in mixed age groups. Having said that, we do have year 11s in forms to mentor year 7s and year 8s, but they don't stay in those form groups like they used to previously. So attendance has been incorporated into our safeguarding in a major way. It's one of our first points of safeguarding practice. So we're very hot on, well, why has that child not been here? What's the reasons why he's not in school? Are we sure that what parents or he's saying are the reasons he's absent? We start looking at it from a safeguarding point of view very quickly now, in a way that we didn't before. We moved on to CPOMs, which is a central system of recording anything at all in terms of any concerns about a child. So every member of staff at every level can go into CPOMs, record a concern, and it will go to the appropriate people. Now, I know that before that we were using email and staff were reporting things, but staff get a lot of emails every day, and particularly senior staff and safeguarding staff. So the issue there was, of course, that you might not see the email or somebody might not follow it up, but now it's there, it's flagged up to the appropriate people, so people can respond very quickly. So there might be a CPOMs log to say that Johnny's not in school. So the form tutor will put that on, the head of year will pick it up immediately, phone home and find out why he's not in school, encourage him to come into school, see what the issue is, make sure it's nothing that we need to be concerned about. We've introduced what we call a pastoral toolkit, and that's really a series of, it's almost like a map of instructions and actions for our pastoral team. So it's a scenario. So when this happens, there's a whole list of things you go through to increase focus on a child, depending on what that issue is. So for attendance, there's a whole list of actions that we would expect the pastoral team to take, ending obviously with, going forward for fining if necessary. We do use the legal system with children that and parents that are really resistant to school. We do go down the legal way, but there's a whole list of actions that we take before we get to that point. We work very closely with Birmingham Education Partnership to become a New Start school, which is the whole school mental health strategy. We are very well advanced along those lines, and in fact we've just managed to get a mental health practitioner into school a few days a week to serve the needs of some of the children in school. I think the whole mental health area for schools has become huge, and it's one of the things that luckily we kind of clued into very early on, really, and managed to get the expertise, the training and the programme into play, with one of our own deputy heads becoming the mental health lead and being very skilled and working very closely with Anna Bateman, who's the BEP consultant, so that we were a long way ahead of that and able to use a lot of their strategies in school to solve some of our attendance issues. We put a massive focus on our key transition points. So we realised that a lot of attendance problems come with the children when they get to us. So we have a really big focus on our year 7 transition. So when the children come from year 6, every child, I'm sure most of you do this as well, every child's visited by the SENCO and the transition team. So the head of year 7, the pastoral team for year 7 will go out to every single primary school and they will visit every child that's come in. They'll talk to the staff, they'll talk to the SENCO, they'll talk to parents if it's flagged that there's an issue or there's a problem. An example of that is one of our pastoral teams spent 8 weeks before the summer going over to we've got a local primary on the same site as us, going once a week to have an afternoon with a child that was very school resistant and, displaying very difficult behaviours. He's now about to, get through to his final exams in year 11. And I think if we hadn't have done that 5 years ago, he wouldn't still be here. He'd have stopped coming to school and we'd have had massive attendance issues with him. We also have a huge focus on children getting into the right options. So we do a lot of work around the year 9 into year 10 option process, making sure that we have a range of options that the children can do that will encourage them to come into school. So we have a range of the traditional EBAC subjects, but we also have a large offer of vocational subjects as well. And there's vocational subjects in each option block. We don't just have a block where, that's where all the vocational children go. It doesn't work like that here. Excuse me. We actually have an open option system, which is not necessarily the norm, but the children are allowed to opt into the 3 blocks as they wish. They're not excluded from any one block. We have a big focus on, if you like, counselling them, working with them and their parents about which might be the right subjects for them and why. But ultimately, if a child insisted that he wanted to do GCSER, even if he really, really wasn't going to get a very high grading it, but he absolutely loved it, we would let him do it, because it might just be, we've had children that have done music that they really don't want, you know, they're really not terribly good at in terms of high grades, but they really, really love it. And I think there is a really big, there's a big positive in allowing one subject that will do that for a child, because it keeps them coming when they have to do all the things that they don't particularly want to do that are compulsory. In terms of Key Stage 4, we have a massive amount of support again. We start the process about the transition into Key Stage 4 in Year 9, about the options, what they want to do. We encourage them to keep an open option set so that they don't absolutely decide that that's their route and that's all they're going to do. We teach them that a good raft of exam results will get them into most courses. Some children are very specific about what they want and they know what they want to do. You know, and we have children from wanting to be doctors to children that want to go into the building trade. So it's very important that the children get the right information. We also make sure that our most vulnerable, our SEND children, and we have probably more than average of children on the autistic spectrum and you know, ADHD. Being a boys' school, it tends to be higher. So we have a designated SEND lead for these children, and they go out on college visits and they visit appropriate courses and sometimes appropriate institutions that will work with them, or they're specifically aimed at children with those challenges. But their transition is as important as anybody else's transition, and it means that it means that they will stay in post-16 education and they've got something to look forward to. It's worth coming to school if you know what your next step is, and if you know that school's going to get you into the next part of your, you know, the next step on the road, really. Basically, what's in it for me. So all of our Gatsby benchmarks are complete. We're doing really well with those, and we have a strategic 5-year plan for careers, starts in Year 7. So all subjects will tell children why it's important to study geography or history or art or music or PE in Year 7, Year 8, Year 9. The teachers remind them at the start of every half term. And remember what we said about why it's important to study music, and it might not necessarily be an academic outcome. It could be about being resilient, it could be about being thoughtful, character, you know, character building, everything. But it also looks at what skills this gives you in terms of the labour market further on. So we make sure that children understand that school is about becoming an adult and becoming an independent adult and being able to do something purposeful when you grow up and when you leave school. We are really, really, really slightly obsessed, I think, with staff and student and parent voice. Every parents' evening, we have a big survey that our parents are very good at doing them now. They just do them, I think, to keep us quiet at the end of parents' evening, because we harass them so much with them. And we put, you know, if we have a question that we need to ask, we'll put it on there. We use SurveyMonkey constantly. Parents are really good at logging in. We find that if you give them a login to do it online, they'll do it, whereas you don't necessarily get sheets of paper back unless you physically got the parents in front of you. The boys are very good as well. They'll log in, you know, during the day, and they'll feed back. They've just fed back about the canteen and stuff like that. And our staff are very good. We do a lot of wellbeing surveys with staff and workload surveys to make sure that, you know, we're not overloading and we're doing the best we can for them. I really think that the feedback, the collaborative nature of how we work is the reason why we're able to change things, because people buy into it and we don't do things to them. What we strive to do is do things together, but do it with an informed kind of strategy so that we know we're moving forward in a way that benefits everybody. Next slide, please. So what do we do differently? As I said, we utilised our form tutors, our learning leaders and our achievement leaders. So we have our form tutors, who are our first line of pastoral and attendance care. We have learning leaders who are, I suppose, a little bit, they're non-teaching, sort of assistant heads of year, and our achievement leaders are teaching heads of year. So what we did, we allocated attendance groups, about 6 students, for a micro focus. So our form tutors had the children that were like 95 to 96.9% attendance. So they would be looking at those children, talking to them, phoning home if they needed to, if they were absent, asking them if there were any problems, basically forming that kind of professional relationship to see whether that child needed support. The 90 to 94.9% children, the learning leaders would take them and they would do some more intensive work about why it was important to be at school, find out if there was anything going on that we could help with, and try and improve the attendance literally week by week. Now, the form tutors see the children twice a day, so that's fairly straightforward. The learning leaders would take the children from form on a Monday, Wednesday and Friday to have these conversations, quite intensive, and it would be a 6-week period. The 89.9% and under are the achievement leaders, so they're the ones that we're really kind of going in on and finding out. These are usually quite complex cases, if you like. There's a lot of things going on, so that would be at the level of the achievement leaders, and that would probably, I'd say some of those would end up being dealt with by the DSLs. We have 3 DSLs in school, and it would probably escalate at some point further up the scale. So that kind of 3-tier approach for us worked really well. The difference between the first 2 groups was phenomenal. You know, they were going up by 2-3%, which I know doesn't sound marvelous, but in terms of attendance, that's across the school, that's a massive lift. The change in the 89.9 is slower, but then there are far more complex issues behind, you know, and I'm sure everybody's got children like this where there's so many complex issues at home, plus other things that you have to move quite slowly, but they do improve. Next slide, please. So we did daily check-ins and calls home by the attendance officer every day. This is what we do. Our attendance officer, she's here till 1:30. So she is absolutely on the ball. She calls in every child that's absent, even if a parent has called in and said that he can't come in because of some kind of minor, or he's got a cold. She'll phone and say, well, you know, is it that bad a cold, or can he come into school? You know, when he goes to work, he can't just take days off because he's got a cold. If it becomes persistent, then the pastoral staff will take it over. We do home visits. So if we've got a child that is looking like he's going to become a refuser, we will go out in the morning. We have some staff, some of our pastoral staff and senior staff that pass perhaps some children's houses in the morning. They'll knock on the door. We have provided alarm clocks before. And now in the advent of the, you know, everyone's got a mobile phone, we've showed them how to set the alarms on those as well. We will do the home visits, we meet the parents, we do safe and well checks, 3 days absence. So if we haven't literally, we call it putting eyes on a child for 3 days, then we go out and find out what's going on. On the 3rd day, a member of staff will go out and visit the home to find out where he is, what's going on. Obviously, if a child's had an operation or something like that, that's not exactly the same thing. But for casual absence, as we call it, we do a check on the 3rd day. We have a lot of parental and family meetings, so we'll get the family to come in, or if they can't come into school for whatever reason, we'll go out to them and have the meeting there. We do a lot of work signposting and sourcing support mechanisms. So in our area, there's a Hall Green support group where they can apply for £150 grants. There are lots of different organisations that, you know, like there's local food banks and all sorts of things. So we will source all that kind of work, all that kind of support rather, and put the families in touch. We do quite a few referrals. We use the system really well, I think. We refer to outside agencies if we believe it's needed. So we will talk to parents about early help, try and get family support workers allocated, and if necessary, escalate to, you know, allocating social workers. One of the things we've also done, and I would definitely advise anyone who has the scheme running near them, the trainee social worker scheme, where you can have a social worker, trainee social worker in school for, I think it's 70 days on a placement. That's a massive help. At the beginning, obviously, you're supporting them quite heavily, but when they find their feet in school, you know, it's just an extra help, a bit like the mental health placement that you can get in school. So for a school, there are things out there that you can source. You just have to have the patience and the input, and then it kind of really pays off for you by having free, you know, extra help. Yes, your staff have to put the time in, but then it's also, you know, another kind of training process that they go through, and it's also professional development for them. We celebrate small successes. So, you know, if a child's been in for a week and he normally doesn't make a week, we make a huge fuss about that. But we also make a huge fuss about 100% attendance as well, and 99 point, you know, we make it real. We have badges, gold, silver and bronze, that they get every term for their attendance, and they wear them on their uniform. They really like those. And we advocate for the child. You know, if like I was saying before, if we believe that it needs to escalate, then we will escalate it. And my staff are really good at getting hold of the right people. You know, they're tenacious, they don't let go, and they will carry on and on and on with Birmingham Children's Trust to get what we need for them. We reward improvement with praise, small rewards such as school equipment. You know, some of the children that struggle to be in school regularly don't have the correct equipment, so we give them, you know, well, you've done really, really well, really pleased with you, so you'll get a pencil case with essentials in it. One of the most favourite rewards is a dinner queue hopper, so they can go straight to the front of the queue. You know, we are a boys' school and we do march on our stomachs, so if they can get to the queue quickly and get the prize food, they really like that. But I think the whole point of all of this is you've got to look at why. Why are they not attending? What's the reason they're not coming to school? Is it a belief system that school's not going to help them? You know, we have a percentage of children who are from generations now of unemployed families whose parents did not have good experiences at school themselves. They don't trust schools. It's a small percentage, but it's a very significant percentage in terms of the amount of work we do with families. So we work really hard to build trust with these people and help them as much as we can, you know, signpost them in the right direction, make sure their children are getting what they need, help them to understand why we're doing what we're doing and ask for their support. And I have to say, you know, to the last one, they really do try and support what we're doing, even if they can't help as much as they would like to. They definitely support the school to move forward with their children. So it is about, again, building those relationships with your school community, you know, whether it be parents or, you know, one lad that we've got, his granddad is the main contact because he's the one that the young man listens to. So we have a really good relationship with his granddad, and he'll come and talk about his grandson and encourage him and watch him do things and make a fuss of him. It's just finding the key that unlocks whatever it is that's blocking that child from kind of focusing in school. Next slide. So whole school, we reviewed and we rewrote our attendance policy, mainly because we do a lot of external reviews so that we can be clear that what we're doing is working. I think it's really dangerous to believe that because you think you're good at something, then that's fine. And you can come up with some brilliant ideas and put them into play. But if it's always you and your team, then I think sometimes you can become a little bit, you get a beam in your eye over it and you just think everything's great. So we have a series of reviews, and we adapt them obviously to whatever inspection process is working at the time, so it kills two birds with one stone. But we've been through a whole process of, we did a safeguarding review, leadership and management review, all of our faculty areas, obviously the curriculum reviews, but we've also focused on personal development, SEND, you know, all of our major areas, and we have people come in, national leaders in education, and do that for us, so it's independent. And one of the things they pointed out, which funny enough we just hadn't realised, was that we've got an attendance policy, everybody has, and we follow it. But what we hadn't really done was made it completely crystal clear to the children. You know, we tell parents if this happens, then this will happen, that's the consequence. But we hadn't really told the children what happens at certain levels of attendance. We told them what happens if they miss a certain amount of school in terms of their grades. But we hadn't really explained in detail what we would do, how we would respond if their attendance dropped to this level or dropped to this level, and you know, there was no really good reason for it. So we spent quite a bit of time explaining to the children, look, this attendance doesn't just mean that your grade might be one grade lower overall. It means that we will do this, then we'll do this, and then we'll do the next thing. And a lot of them actually fed back that they didn't know that, and they thought that was, you know, really helpful to know. It's also now in our school planners in a child-friendly form. so that they know they can refer to it, and the form tutors and the pastoral staff can refer to it as well. We also added a couple of attendance questions to parents on their feedback forms about whether they understood, one, the impact of attendance, and two, what the procedures were, what it meant when your child hit a certain percentage and what the school would do. And thankfully, because we've done so much work, that we've had 100% positive feedback on that, so we feel that we've got that right. But I suppose my whole point here is if you never ask anybody else to look at what you're doing, you never realise which bits are missing, or what chinks you've got in your armour, really. We raised the profile of attendance with all staff in school, and instead of what we decided to do is, instead of telling children off when they came back to school about how long they've been away, we actually welcomed them back, and we're really positive. It's brilliant. It's great to see you back in school. Fantastic. You're back. You're back with us. We've really missed you. They're a little bit perplexed to start with, but they responded really well to it, and have come back and said, oh, I was really worried about coming back. I thought I'd get really told off, and I'd be behind. And the other side of that, of course, is a child that's been absent for a while needs input. They can't just be dropped back into lessons. So we put together a programme where a child that's been absent will have catch up, not catch up that's punitive, so he doesn't have to stay behind for 2 hours a day to catch up on all the work he missed when he wasn't here, because that's really going to encourage him to come back to school. So we started to take him out of non-essential curriculum time to catch up on the stuff that is essential, and that's like a 3-week programme, and that works really well. We're really lucky as well that we have staff that are available during form times in the afternoon that will do intervention with children that have fallen behind as well. So that's worked really well for them. Next slide. So we produce weekly attendance trackers that follow the cumulative attendance week by week for the whole school, with a complete subgroup analysis. So we know all about the disadvantage, the ethnic groups, the SEND disadvantage, the higher prior attainers disadvantage. We've got a complete breakdown of all the groups. We know how things are tracking. One of the things that we track really closely for us is our white English boys. They're the group that we have to keep the closest eye on. So we know week by week exactly what the attendance is of those children, whether they're going up, whether they're going down. We've got brilliant data analysis that do that for us in school, and we use CISRA for our academic data, so you can use the subgroups on that as well, so we can track progress with attendance. You put the attendance into the same program and it works really, really well. So every lesson we use Sims, and we have a missing register set for 10 minutes on our Sims system. So we ask our staff to register within 10 minutes of a lesson or form period starting. A Sims alert will be sent, which tells our senior staff and our pastoral staff if a register's missing or has got missing marks. Whether the register's missing or whether there's a missing mark, it will flag up that there's an error in the register. So at that point, one of us will go and see the member of staff and tell them that the register needs to be done if it's not done. Excuse me. This can be, staff don't particularly enjoy being told they haven't done the register, but we make a real thing about it in terms of professional conduct. It's a safeguarding issue if we don't know where the children are. It's a basic professional standard to take a register. It's a protocol that we expect staff to do at the start of every lesson. It's also a settling technique for children. It's a routine. So it's something that we rarely have to do now. At the beginning, it was a little bit, staff would get a bit, okay, I'm going to do it in a minute. No, I don't want it done in a minute. I want it done in the first 10 minutes because I need to know where they are within that time. So again, that's just a protocol that, we insisted on. The senior line manager of the faculty will visit the lesson to request the registers completed. If it happens again, so if it happens regularly, for example, the senior line manager, so our senior staff are allocated faculties to line manage. So for example, one of the deputies has maths, science and MFL. So for example, if one of the science teachers didn't do their register in a week, maybe 2 or 3 times, he would have a meeting at that point and just say, look, you know, this is a safeguarding necessity, it's a standard procedure, it's a routine we use to start lessons, you need to make sure that you do it. That does the trick. There doesn't have to be anything heavy-handed. You know, you don't have to sort of start wading in with verbal warnings and all sorts, unless of course you've got somebody that refuses point blank to do the register, and then of course you would. We've never had that. Once you kind of explain it to staff on a one-to-one basis, we've never had an issue after that. Attendance is a weekly agenda item at the pastoral meetings. So every week at the pastoral meetings, it's there on the agenda, and it's brought to the main SLT-led pastoral meeting for discussion and agreed action points. So it comes, so the deputies that oversee the pastoral side of things will come to the main SLT meeting with the pastoral data, with the concerns around attendance. Our faculty meetings also, so our academic staff will flag up poor attendance in their weekly meetings, which will then be fed back to the pastoral team. So our faculty leaders are well aware of the fact that if a child's not in school, he can't learn. So they will, you know, say to the pastoral team, he's not in school, he's missed X amount of lessons, I'm really concerned. So we've got it coming back from everybody. In every single case of questionable attendance, we have to look at the bigger picture. We have to see children don't just not come to school because they can't be bothered. It's more than that. It might seem like that sometimes. So we always go into what we call the bigger picture. So next slide, please. So the first set of questions for us are, why doesn't he want to come to school? Why is he not here? Is it because he doesn't feel safe at school? Is there a problem? Is he upset with some of the other children? Is he upset with the staff, maybe? Is he very anxious, for example? Does he not feel welcome? Is he not with the right staff to make him feel that he's welcome in school? Is he not in the right form class or teaching groups? Is there something wrong? Is there something that's just not working for him? He's got issues with other children. That's, you know, that's often the first level of issues. Are there health issues that we're, you know, we don't know about? I remember one child, the pastoral team getting really anxious about him. He transitioned up into year 7, and we hadn't had the records from the primary school, and we hadn't had any input from the primary. We didn't know that he had junior rheumatoid arthritis. So his health issues were massive. But once you know, then you can start to support. So does he have issues at home that are affecting his attendance? You know, some children are frightened to leave people at home because there's something going on. There are a lot of children that are carers at home, and, you know, they don't want to, you know, that their mum or their dad might be ill, or the brother or sister might be ill, and they want to stay at home and look after them, or there's something going on at home. You know, there might be some major family crisis that they don't want to come to school because they're frightened that when they get back, something else might have happened. Anxiety and mental health issues, as we all know, have risen. You know, they often stop children coming to school. Or are there any, you know, there are external factors that parents with mental health issues, sometimes we get parents that are frightened to send their children to school, particularly over the COVID period. You know, that became a real heightened anxiety for a lot of parents, and the whole carer, you know, the young carer picture is really strong for these youngsters that have this massive extra responsibility. So we feel that you know, the right thing to do is to work through this bigger picture and find out what's going on. Are there pressures outside of school? You know, is he involved with groups that he shouldn't be involved with that are putting pressure on him not to come to school? Is he vulnerable? You know, is there an element of exploitation somewhere? Or, you know, all these things have to be considered. I really don't believe now, after years of looking at this, that children just decide not to come to school. There's reasons behind it. It's just up to us to find out what they are. Next slide, please. So our offer to them is, we strive really hard to make the boys want to be with us. We want them to be here. We create as warm and family-based climate for learning that we possibly can. We promote ourselves as a community, as a family. We know that the boys believe in this because when we have all the external reviews, we do a lot of student voice, the external people do it. And one of the words that comes up all the time is the boys say it's like a bigger family. They like being here. It's like being in family. We've got an open door policy in school. We don't shut our children out. We don't lock them out of the building. So as soon as we open in the morning, the building's open, the boys can come in. You know, we have children that come in here at 7:10 in the morning and sit at some of the breakout tables or in the library and chat or work or socialise. Staff can be approached at any point in time. We're not hierarchical. A child can come to my office and ask me something just as much as he could go to his form tutor. We encourage children to share their issues and talk about things. So it's really important, particularly as boys, that they come and they express their things through words, you know, and not physicality. When parents arrive at school, we have a policy that they will be seen. They might have to wait if somebody's in lessons or in a meeting, but we don't turn parents away. We ask them to wait, get them a cup of coffee or a cup of tea, and then when someone's free, they'll see them. We try and support at all times. I don't mean that we're a walkover. What I mean is that we try and be as open, as accommodating and supportive as possible. Next slide, please. So we run small group support in the following areas. So our pastoral team, our learning leaders, or our assistant heads of years, they do a small group course in year 7, 8, and 9, which we call Breakthrough, which is an anger management course. It lasts for 6 weeks. So a group of 4 or 5 boys who show explicitly, if you like, heightened, not really aggression, but the inability to deal with things without resorting to the fight reflex, will be selected out, and they go through this process of having to talk through what it is that makes them angry and how they can develop strategies so that they can express that anger in a different way. It's an intense course, but it does have really good outcomes. So we probably use that for about 30 children a year, I think, across the year groups. We also have anxiety and coping skills, a small group that works with children that are quite anxious and how to cope with that anxiety. A totally different set of course materials to the Breakthrough group, obviously. And we also have a self-esteem group, so that, you know, for those really sort of anxious, not really anxious, but those children that just don't think they're worth anything. And there are quite a lot of them. They have very low self-esteem. So we do some work with those. Again, they're all 6-week courses. They can be put onto a follow-up course if we don't feel that they've progressed enough, or we just rotate onto a next system. But the assistant head of year will also keep in touch with the boys for a whole term. So he or she will check back in with them. Remember, these are non-teaching staff I'm talking about. So throughout their working week, they can take children out and talk to them. One of the questions we're often asked is, well, what about the timetable? Well, they don't take them out the same lesson every week. They rotate so that it's maybe one lesson in 6 weeks that's affected. So they come out of English once, they won't come out of English again. Might be science, might be maths, might be art, whatever. And also further up the school, coping with exam stress. So from year 10 onwards, the boys that are getting quite anxious. And it's an interesting misconception that boys don't really care much about their results. They get incredibly anxious as the exams get closer. As soon as year 11 starts, we see the exam stress starting, you know, the pressure because they're applying for colleges, they get their offers. So we do work, another member of staff does work coping with exam stress, and we also get in a lot of revision techniques. The practitioners that do the days, I can't think of the name now, I've probably got it on a slide later on. That's a really good day. The boys really enjoy that. They're taught all different memory techniques and it's all fun, and it really de-stresses them to learn different ways of remembering things but have a good time doing it. So suddenly it becomes fun rather than something to immensely stress them out. We also employ a professional counsellor. So fully, university degree educated counsellor 2 days a week to work with the children. But we have also put parents on for a 6-week course, a 1 hour a week, 6-week course, and staff at times, should they need it. That has had a massive impact. So she's not connected to us, apart from the fact that we pay her. The connection is with the children and sometimes the parents, and obviously for staff occasionally have things happen where they need support. So we do, so it's 10 hours a week counselling that we pay for. Potentially that's 10 children that we're in a counselling session, and we do that over a 6-week period. There are children where we continue, but if it goes longer than 6 or 7 weeks, then we do, our counsellor does recommend that they go to their GPs and get referred through a different route, because usually it uncovers things that obviously we don't know about because it's a professional relationship. She will talk to us about a safeguarding issue, obviously, but it is, you know, it's client-patient confidentiality, and that's the thing that works, because the boys know that what they tell the counsellor is between her and them, to a certain degree, and she's totally independent. She doesn't, you know, she's not the school. So, you know, I would definitely stress that as a real positive. Next slide, please. So you know, I talked before about advocating for the children and their families. So food banks, we provide food. We have done it several times, recommended local facilities. We have, our citizenship group a few years ago came up with a scheme they call Food Bank Friday. So the Friday of every half term, we have a Food Bank Friday, and we ask the local school community to donate any item on the list for food bank. It's overwhelming the amount of food we get. We then make packs up for the families we know need food bank parcels in school, and then we donate the rest to the local Kings Heath food bank. It's a brilliant scheme. It works really well. Our school community are incredibly generous, and you know, it's just brilliant to see the response that we get. We got so much as well over the pandemic from people who were concerned about other members of the school community. We refer, we advise parents to use PAUSE, which is a walk-in clinic in Birmingham, Hall Green Families, which are family support workers, housing applications for resilience funding. We had about 40 families get £150. We held the clinic here. So Hall Green Families came to school and held a day-long clinic, and we invited families in to come and do the paperwork with them. One of our pastoral staff sat and helped them all through the paperwork so they could get £150 cash before Christmas. And we approached the local charities for funding for families in need, with the Cornerstone and Kings Heath Lions Club have both donated to the school to pass on to families in need. We work on the basis that if you don't ask, you don't get. And, you know, it's a phone call or a letter. It doesn't take up too much of our time, but it has a massive impact for the people on the other end of it. Next slide, please. So the Wheelers Way, for us, it's about education, but it's not all about the standard classroom. We don't believe that education just takes place in the classroom and is just academic. Now, I realise that as we go through this, it's going to come across as quite quirky and a bit different, but it is who and what we are. So what other things do we do to entice the children or encourage the children to come into school? So, for example, we've had since September, particularly since September, because they've had such a difficult time over COVID. We've had the positive ponies in school. You can see them on the slide, these little Shetland ponies that come in. We use those with our most vulnerable, our ADHD boys and our SEND boys. So they came for the day, and you look after them. So they're these really cute little Shetland ponies, and the lady's lovely, and she teaches them all about pony care and equine care, and they groom them, they look after them. And, you know, the children just had the most amazing time. We had quite a few parents come in to see their child with the ponies. The effect of it is amazing. They're still talking about it now. It's just absolutely beautiful to see. She also brings in, you'll see on the picture above the ponies, these strange looking chickens that like being handled, and the boys really like that. And she talks to them about, you know, chicken husbandry and all that kind of thing. And they just have a really nice time. We have eggs in school, so we have the Hens for Hire, which is the same company as Positive Ponies. So we get, I think it's 15 eggs, and then we watch them hatch out the chicks, which is just amazing. I think I enjoy that as much as they do, just seeing the little chicks come out. They're absolutely fascinated by it. The science teachers kind of host it, and they do all about, you know, the whole biology side of things and incubation and all that kind of thing. But the amount of children that just go every day, coming in really early to look at the chicks and that kind of thing. The animal man, you'll see all the different animals that come in. You know, the child with some sort of lizard on his head there. So they're great. They come in with a whole range of animals in. It's from one of the zoos in near Wolverhampton, I think. It's one of the zoos that does the endangered species and things, but they use this as a fundraising, so that the animals come out into schools and the guys talk about habitat and the children get to handle the animals. And we did that with the whole year 7 and the whole of year 8. They absolutely loved it. We had Carl Nova, who's a performance poet, really good performance poet with year 9. They absolutely love that. So they were really academic day, but he dressed it up in such a fun way that I don't think they even realised, you know, the level that they were working at, really. We've got yet to come some history reenactments. Apparently they're going to turn our hall into the First World War trenches, so I'm really looking forward to that one. I just hope the mud's not part of it. We have theme days in the cafeteria, so if Aspens, which are our caterers, are putting on Mexican food, we will have Mexican music and all sorts of things going on, like a Mexican theme day or French theme day, you know, just kind of fun, really, which the boys really buy into. Interform competitions with reward trips as an incentive. We had a massive fundraiser for a new library fit out rather, and the boys raised £15,000 in a term because they were so competitive against each other, came up with all these ideas to raise the money, and the form that raised the most money went bowling. And we have, you see the picture at the top, is reading dogs. So we have dogs that come in and the children read to them, because if you read to a dog and you can stroke the dog and it's really soothing, but it also means that the dog doesn't judge or criticise, so that works really well for them as well. Next slide, please. So some pictures there. We do lots of leadership activities. You'll see that's our Poppy Day ambassadors, Remembrance Day ambassadors, Christmas dinner day where we have Christmas jumpers and lots of Christmas music throughout the day because it's fun. Lots of sponsored walks and activities. It's just, this is what we do, really. We try and cover every aspect of school and fun and academic work as well. Next. So leadership at all opportunities at all levels, prefects, head and deputy head boys, sports leaders, we've got an eco squad, gardening gang, lots of tutoring. Our year 9s, 10s, 11s tutor the younger children. Peer readers, so our older boys read with the little ones, librarians, Remembrance Day ambassadors, student parliament, students as learning partners with faculty so they can feed back to the academic teams, our mental health ambassadors who speak on our behalf to Birmingham, and peer mentoring as well. Next slide. So our overall absence down to 4.3, national for all is 5.5, it's even higher for boys. Persistent absence is down to 8.9, national at the moment it's 13.7. COVID times, so we ended the autumn term on a cumulative 4.9. Persistent absence was at 15.6. We were the ones in brackets, so we were not as high as everybody else, and at the moment our attendance is running at about 94.5%. Our local schools are struggling with about 91, and I know nationally, I think secondary maintained schools are running at about 87%, if I'm right. I think the latest attendance update. So we'll carry on doing what we're doing and hope that it keeps rising as COVID hopefully tails off. Next slide. So we focus continually on our vulnerable. Our SEND are also disadvantaged, are a big focus for us. They have the most issues in terms of classroom-based activities. We have staff shorts, which is training, 15-minute training. This is what to do with this child. This is exactly what not to do with him. You've got to make reasonable adjustment. It's got to be on an individual basis that works for him. We talked about the trainee social worker programme. Next slide. That's it. That's any questions, really.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Diane. That was really, really clear and interesting and comprehensive. So thank you. And we've had some questions that come through from people that have joined. I'll start with one that we've had from multiple people, and maybe we can pick this up offline, but people were very interested in the pastoral toolkit that you mentioned, and I think I've seen a copy of that, but we're wondering whether that could be something that was shared more widely with people.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. I mean, it's just really a guided list of what to do next in every scenario. What do you do if, do this, do this, do this. There's a whole list of actions before you get down to the point where you have to pass it on or refer it up. But yeah, that I'm absolutely fine with that being shared.
Excellent, thank you. And we had another question, was kind of related questions here. One was just specifically about the achievement leaders, whether or not they're teaching or non-teaching members of staff. But I think there's a kind of broader set of questions that we've had through about the structure of your kind of pastoral support and how many people that you've got working directly on attendance in the school.
So we have one part-time attendance officer who works exclusively on the first day calls, the registers, etc., the kind of admin side of it, and phoning parents. Then we have a learning leader for each. So 7 and 8 have a learning leader and an achievement leader, and then they have a deputy head that oversees that. So 7 and 8 have a learning leader, an achievement leader, and a deputy. 9 and 10 have exactly the same structure. The learning leader is non-teaching. The achievement leader is a teacher on 12 hours a week. Year 11 have an assistant head teacher with another assistant head teacher that oversees them exclusively because they have a lot of different needs to the rest of the school.
Excellent, thank you. And there was a question actually about, I don't know if there's more that you want to say about this. You talked a bit about the kind of move to using CPOMs, but about the kind of join up between attendance and your safeguarding practice, and I don't know if there's more that you want to kind of elaborate there on terms of the join up that you see between those two things.
Yeah, we kind of changed our view on attendance in that if a child was suffering or displaying poor attendance, we kind of changed our view to that was a safeguarding issue because we didn't know where they were and what they were doing, which makes it suddenly a much more urgent and much more compelling situation to act on. If we don't know where they are and we don't know what they're doing, then that's a safeguarding issue when we're supposed to be responsible for them. So that's kind of a changing kind of viewing of low attendance, if you like. So it comes under our safeguarding policy. There is, in our safeguarding policy, there is an attendance section that if there is a low attendance or an attendance concern, it needs to be investigated as a safeguarding issue alongside other safeguarding issues.
Excellent, thank you. And there was one more here actually about some of the different groups that you talked about, which was really interesting. And you mentioned the anxious group. The group supporting children that might be anxious and coping skills. It'd be really helpful to hear a little bit more about that. But we also had a related question, which was somebody asking about the impact of mental health issues on your current levels of attendance and how significant of an issue you thought that was in the context of COVID.
Yeah, I think it has been. I mean, our normal attendance would run pre-COVID would be running at, say, 96.8, 97%, literally between, surfing around that area. We're running now at about 94.5. So there's been a significant impact in getting children back from COVID. I think the fear of COVID has, again, that anxiety, that mental health issue, both with parents and children, has caused a real issue in getting children to return to school, particularly with our most vulnerable families. It definitely seems to be more of a problem with our SEND children, children that maybe have medical issues as well. I think it's going to be, you know, the other day we were 96.4 attendance, and then, you know, on a daily basis I'm talking about there, and then it will drop to like 95 or 94. But I guess at the moment that's kind of the way it's going to go until things clear, really. You know, we're still having, as I'm sure all schools are, cases of COVID with children and staff. So until that levels at some point. But I think it's going to be, there is definitely a small group of our school population, as I'm sure there are as everybody else is, that are very anxious about COVID and infection. You know, you've also got the misinformed as well, where you're fighting through belief systems that are not necessarily helpful to trying to get children back in school. Where we have that, we reach out to the local community, to different groups in the local community, and see if they can work with the family with us to get them back in school. That's been really successful a couple of times. It's very time consuming, but it does work. But I think, you know, it is going to be a battle as we go forward. There's definitely a couple more, maybe 2 or 3 more children and families than we used to have that are resistant to returning to school. And I think one of the problems with remote learning is that parents feel that, well, why can't they just log on? I'd feel better if he just logged on and did his lessons. And when Omicron particularly was at its peak, you know, children were logging in to classroom lessons, so our teachers were teaching, but children were also on the board logging into lessons if they were fit enough to, you know, if they were isolated and fit enough to partake of lessons. And now some parents, we have a couple of parents, about 4 of them, that feel that that's the best way forward for their son, and trying to explain, well, we have to explain that actually no, we can't do that. We do not provide online work or materials for parents or children that are not attending school for no specific reason, because I believe at that point you are enabling poor attendance. You know, we've been told by the attendance team at Birmingham that that's absolutely the correct stance to take, unless there's a medical, and this is one of the hard bits, but we do pursue this. You have to have medical evidence to say that your child is too anxious. You have to have a diagnosed anxiety by a psychologist or a psychiatrist to say that a child is too anxious to attend school before you can actually provide work at home. And then they would be referred. Here in Birmingham, it's James Brindley, one of the hospital schools, and then that makes it, you know, illegal. It's legally okay at that point. So, and please don't think that everything that we do is nice and fluffy. We do take families to court if they refuse to attend. If we've reached the end of all of our strategies and we can't get anywhere, then we will do the SARMS meetings and go forward, because that's what you have to do.
And could I check on the breakthrough group and the anxious group? Is there more that you can say just briefly about?
Yeah, so we have a programme that we work through with the children, the reasons why we get angry, how we feel when we get angry, how we respond. So it'd be about 4 or 5 children. It doesn't really work with anymore. It becomes too big to, it has to be quite an intimate setting. What usually happens is it's quite volatile for a couple of weeks, and then they start to learn other strategies, other ways to respond. They're given scenarios that they work through. They may really kind of encouraged and almost sometimes not provoked, but really, really encouraged to think about how other people feel. You know, they're very sure about how they feel and why they're angry, but they need to be able to learn a bit of empathy about how somebody else might feel, or why that scenario worked and why it didn't work. And then they're offered alternative scenarios, and then they are prompted to think about how they could change the way they behave. I would say for 5 children, it probably works for 4 out of the 5, and the 5th one might need more. He might need to be referred to a different group, or we might have to get some one-to-one support for him for a while. But a lot of the children that, particularly post-COVID, the younger children mainly, the children that have come up from year 6 into year 7 and the 7s into 8s, their social skills are so lacking compared to the older children and the normal level that we see them at. You know, the primaries warned us that they were not what we would be expecting, and their social skills have been very, very scratchy and very volatile in the first 6 weeks of the term until they kind of settle to being back in school and around each other all the time. It's much better now, but it did take some time.
Excellent, thank you. I think that's probably the key set of questions that have come through so far. So yeah, I just want to say thanks again, Diane, for taking the time out of your day and pulling together something so comprehensive on your school and all of the kind of different aspects which go into improving attendance in the school, and not just the kind of directly attendance related things, but the sort of wider approach to curriculum and all the other pastoral support elements that you put in place. Monarch, if you can move on to the next slide just very quickly. I will mention the attendance data trial again that the department is piloting at the moment. We encourage everyone all schools to sign up to that if they haven't done so already, and you should be able to find more details on this slide about who you contact in order to sign up for that data trial. But that will be something that will be really useful for the department, and hopefully in the kind of medium term also something that will be really useful for schools, trusts and local authorities. As before, if you can fill in the feedback form if you've found this session useful, and if you want any suggestions, to give us suggestions about future sessions that we could run, that would be really appreciated. And as ever, there should be the sign up links for the future webinars and the recordings of this and any other webinar on the attendance best practice page that we'll also find on the right hand side of your screen. I think that's everything from me, so thanks again for joining us.